Hello, everyone. Ryan Rodriguez back on another episode of Cal Maritime Career Services Connecting Keelhaulers show. In this episode, we have our second interview with recruiters from industry partners, this time with Military Sealift Command. We are joined today by Gary Loy, who is a field recruiter for MSC, and Michael Latham, who is the recruitment coordinator for the Marine Employment Division. Gary and Michael, thank you for taking some time out of your day to join me.
Thanks, Ryan, for having us.
Thank you, Ryan, for having us. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. So, Gary, we'll hop into the first question, and it's just kind of a little background on you. What roles do you recruit for MSC, and kind of what how do you play a role in this whole process?
Well, Ryan, I'm specifically responsible for working with licensed engineers and culinary candidates. However, all the MSC recruiters are general recruiters, which means we are versed, on all the open positions that MSC currently has, and we can guide a prospect who meets the eligibility requirements with submitting a quality application. MSC currently has various positions in all the departments open, from entry level all the way up to more senior experienced positions. Currently, we have about 27 different positions, some licensed and some unlicensed, that we are recruiting for.
Gotcha. And I guess what would some of those licensed or unlicensed positions be that kind of would, I guess, because we do have our business students, our global studies students and stuff like that kind of looking at MSC, what would some of those positions be looking like for them?
Well, Ryan, the unlicensed positions for the global studies would be like our assistant storekeeper and our yeoman storekeeper positions. Those are positions that somebody with a supply chain management background and training could look at as an entry point into MSC. Now, ideally, those graduates from those programs could look at the junior supply officer position, which is one of the positions that we would offer for graduates from Cal Maritime. But as far as, like the deck, we have the able-bodied seaman position. So those third mates, those cadets graduating with their third officer's endorsements could look at able-bodied seamen if the third officer position isn't being offered at the time that they're looking for employment. And the engineers, for our third assistant engineers, we have various QMed or qualified member of the engineering department positions open for unlicensed junior engineer, deck engineer, machinist, refrigeration engineer, pumpman, generally graduating from Cal Maritime with a third assistant engineer. If they look at unlicensed positions, they would most likely, the engineers would be best suited for applying for the unlicensed junior engineer, the refrigeration engineer, or the deck engineer machinist.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So good little background on the position. So now thinking about the application resume and all that stuff, I know that the MSC application is a little bit unique compared to other positions cadets might be applying for. So can you kind of take us through what components of the resume and stuff that you guys are looking for, and even broader in the application through, I know you guys had like some short answers and stuff like that. So what would be good tips to prepare before submitting their application?
Well, Ryan, I think the employment application process with MSC is fairly simple and pretty straightforward. It's all done via our website. The applicant simply needs to visit the website and they'll develop their online profile. When the profile is developed, it's basically a compilation of information about the applicant, which is going to include general information, work employment history, education, any professional qualifications they may have, and certifications and other supporting information that they provide. The data from that profile is used to fill out the various sections of the actual employment application that we use. So when they build their profile and load it with information, it is then used to generate the actual application. They build their profile, they submit their application. It'll go through a review process, a technical review process, to make sure it's all complete and that all the required documents are there. Once it's technically reviewed, it gets moved over to the Marine Employment Department, where they will screen the application and determine whether or not they want to take it to the next step, which would be an interviewing phase. If it goes to the interviewing phase, and they are contacted about conducting an interview, and from that interview, at some point, they will be, it'll be determined whether or not they want to, offer them a conditional position. So I would tell you that the best tip would be to be prepared and ensure that they've thoroughly read the job announcement. The job announcement is the official document that is generated, that announces the position and announces all the elements as far as eligibility requirements and evaluation requirements and things like that. And it also tells the applicant really how to apply for the position. But thoroughly understanding the job announcement before they start the process of actually submitting their application is really going to help them out a lot. So I tell them to read the job announcement first. Secondly, and you kind of alluded to this with there's some small questions in there. We actually have a section in the job announcement that's called evaluation criteria. And some folks can kind of refer to these as what they call KSAs, knowledge, skills, and assessments. So every position is going to have an evaluation criteria section to it. And it's usually 4 or 5 small questions that we expect the applicant to respond to. This is an area where they're asked to kind of expound upon their knowledge of a particular, subject or a particular skill set that they might have. And so it's very important that they take the time to write thorough statements down so that it gives the evaluator, something to really look at and can kind of gauge where that individual candidate might be as far as their knowledge base goes. So they don't want to skimp on those, because if they skimp on those, then what they're basically doing is asking the evaluator to make an assessment with vague information. And the evaluator is not going to typically err in favor of the applicant if they don't provide good information. So I tell them to take the time, write them out in a Word document, think about them before you actually just dive in head first and submit your application. And then finally, I think it's important that the applicant, when they're building their profile, that they load that profile with all the information that they want to be used in consideration for their application. There's a section in the documents portion of their profile that allows them to add extra documents, not relating to their TWIC or their passport or their MNC, but it could be documents where it shows their transcripts, their transcripts are important. If they're going to, rely heavily on their GPA as a consideration points, they should load their transcripts in there. Letters of recommendation, if they have any letters of recommendations from any of their cadet sailing or from other professionals within the industry, those things would be looked at. It's important that they load this stuff into their profile before they actually submit their application. And the reason for that is that once they hit submit on their application, their profile, there's kind of like a snapshot is taken of their profile, and all the documents and stuff that they have in their profile at that time is captured and included in the application. So if they were to submit their application and then go back and load something into their profile after they've submitted their application, that new information is not going to be looked at as part of that application, especially if they don't let us know that they've done that. There's a provision that we can go in and kind of fix that. But generally, we like to capture the application at one time so that we can, move it forward. So I would say that's probably the 3 best tips, is to read the announcement, be thorough with their evaluation criteria statements, and ensure that their profile is complete at the time of application. Mike, do you have anything that you'd like to add with that one?
No, that was very thorough. I appreciate the response, and that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Gotcha. Good. And just like a couple other things on those short answers and some things that we've seen. First, because you're talking about being thorough on the evaluation criteria. So how long are you looking for responses to be? And then some things that we do run into, especially with the students that are applying for the JSO position, is what if they don't have a direct experience with one of the programs or applications that you're looking for? How would they kind of go about still articulating maybe the skills or finding out, what something similar that they maybe have done in the past that can kind of speak to their qualifications on this application or program that they haven't ever used before?
Ryan, that's a really good question, because I see that in a lot of different areas too, especially with new mariners that are trying to start out in the industry, and they may not have any actual relative experience with that particular subject. And the first thing I tell them to do is read that statement and do a little investigating on their own. And what I mean by that is that they should read that statement and then go and look up and see what that statement is talking about. And then from what they find, look at what they have that might be a transferable experience or an experience that's somewhat related. We recognize that the individuals coming right out of school may not have a lot of experience in certain areas, but they may have some skill sets that are similar in nature. One of the questions might state, talk about maintaining certain logs or maintaining a requisition form, or doing stock control and inventory and things like that. Just kind of throw some examples out there. Well, they may not have any of the familiarity with doing that on a Navy system, but that individual may have worked in a retail industry. They may have worked in a warehousing type industry, or for that fact, they may have worked right there on the campus at the ship store.
Mhm.
And if they can show some of those transferable skills and then kind of relate to that, and then flat out say, hey, I have no firsthand experience doing this, but I've done things that are similar, and here are some of the things that I've done. And it's better to do that than to say, I got no experience, and then put a dot and move on to the next statement. Because again, it's not only about specifically what you know, but it's also about what you do know and how it might compare to what we're looking for.
Gotcha. No, definitely. And that kind of leads into kind of the next question. Because yeah, we do see a lot of students are like, I don't have the technical skills or so on and so forth that they're looking for, but they do have a lot of transferable skills, like you said. So what are some certain transferable skills that do stand out, whether it be for third mate, third assistant engineer, JSO, QMed, able-bodied seaman, yeoman? And I know that's kind of a lot, but just different things that you guys are looking for from an undergrad perspective of like, these are things that you can carry into this job that we will then teach you the technical side of it.
I would tell you that I'll kind of break these down into some of the areas of responsibility that they might be placed in. And I'll start with a licensed position first, say either a licensed deck officer or licensed engineer, or even for that fact, the junior supply officer position. Some of the key things are going to be, their adaptability and their willingness to learn. Okay. You're right. When we bring on a JSO out of the school there, when we hire somebody as a JSO, they're going to get whisked away off to about 7 weeks of training someplace so that they can learn about the Navy supply system and all that other stuff. But then again, they're not going to have any practical experience. But one of the things that they're going to be expected to have is going to be some organizational skills. All right. And so that's something that's going to be important for them to highlight is their organizational abilities and those organizational skill sets. As far as the engineers go, whether it's a licensed engineer or a QMed, they're going to be talking a lot about what they've done in their training phases to get up to the point to where they are, today. And so we need them to illustrate that, they have the ability to understand and follow directions. Okay, that's going to be paramount right there, because they're going to be put into positions where they're going to be given a tasking, they're going to be given instructions. And the most important thing that they need to know is that if they don't understand what they're given, they need to say something so that, clarity can be given to them. So I think a transferable skill set is going to be the adaptability and the willingness to learn. And I don't know if that's really a skill set as more as it is might be a character trait, but that's going to be very important for them. And the same thing with the deck officers. First off, none of these positions these individuals are going to be placed in a position to where they're going to be prone to failure, because we don't want them to fail. So we're definitely going to be giving them oversight to make sure that, they don't fail. What they need to do, though, is to definitely let us know what their limitations are, so that we know where they're at and how we can, work with them and help them develop. So I think transferable skill sets are going to be management, leadership, willingness to learn. I mean, that's definitely got to be it. So the adaptability part is definitely got to be there for them. And then the intuition piece, they have to be, I hate to use the word smart enough, but I just said it. So they got to be smart enough to know what their limits are, so that when those limits are going to be exceeded by a task, they can say something so that they can get, resources. The individuals that typically fail are the ones most likely who won't ask for help.
Got you. Yep. So self-awareness, and we hear that from
Self-awareness.
other employers as well. Is it's okay to not know everything, but it's not okay to then be quiet about it or try and forge ahead without asking. So
Right. So I'm gonna add a couple of one or two other things. Maybe they went to a technical school prior to then, or while they was in high school, or before they came over to you guys, they may went to like a welding course, or they may have went to an automotive course, or they have went to a refrigeration school, or anything that they said they did prior to going into the academy, or something they did a part-time while they're at the school. They may be cooking, baking, doing accounting somewhere in one of the areas, something that's translatable to it. They may be an apprentice somewhere with a refrigeration engineer, or they're doing some things in a technical school somewhere that could be cross over to the skill sets they need for the engineering department, even the supply department. They may be working in a Walmart or something, and they may be in charge of cargo or moving supplies back and forth from one area to another. That could be translatable. There's so many other skill sets that's translatable to MSC. They just gotta they think outside of the box, and a lot of it can cross connect and give them more of a broad base of thinking, and be able to write down more things to show that they have some of the translatable skills to be with MSC.
definitely. Thanks, Michael. Before we move on a little bit from the skills and all that stuff, always in our office, kind of a first ask by the cadets is the resume, and what should the resume look like, and so on and so forth. How long should it be? What should I be including on there and stuff? And I know from talking to you in the past, Gary, it's MSC resumes are a little bit longer than normal. You guys are looking for a little bit more stuff, including like watch standing and stuff. So just quickly touch on like what you guys look for on that resume, and things beyond just work experience and education that students should be making sure that they include on that.
Well, Ryan, first, I want to go back just 1 second here on this whole profile thing, because as I mentioned during that portion, when they go and apply based on the information that they do put in their profile, it's going to generate a system resume that's going to be provided as part of their application. Now, and again, that system resume is only as good as the information that they've put into the system itself. The resume that they can add, and they can add a supplemental resume by including it as one of the documents in their profile. It doesn't have to be a federal resume by no means. All right. A federal resume is very wordy, very long, and all that other stuff. It could be a general formatted type resume, 1 or 2 pages. And a lot of the resumes that I see are typically, one of those combination type resumes that have both, a little bit of work history and then a little bit of functional section to it, as far as a functional resume goes. The things that they want to include in a resume, though, is things that are gonna relate to the position that they're applying for. And so naturally, if they're applying for an engineering position, or they're applying for a deck position or logistics position, they want to try to make sure that they highlight things that they talk about that are going to be related to that field. We want to see them talk about, for college students, if they do participate in any extracurricular activities and they belong to any of the other programs or clubs or anything like that, if they exhibit leadership roles, they should talk about those things within inside that resume as well. But that stuff shouldn't be the dominating thing. If they're an engineer, they should be talking about things that are related to the engineering field. So if they cadet sailed, where they cadet sailed, kind of the duties and responsibilities that they had while they were cadet sailing. Same thing, again, for deck officers and so forth, they should be highlighting that stuff. Their work history, they should include some of their work history, even though that they're a full-time student. If they have any work that's going on that they're doing while they're in school, they should be talking about that work history. Most importantly, though, that we're going to look for things that are associated with the position that they're applying for. And then we're going to look for things that are going to have them stand out, in leadership roles. If they have any special endorsements that might be out of the ordinary, I know in some cases the deck officers will get towing endorsements. Okay, and if they have those endorsements, they want to highlight that. They want to make sure that they talk about that. Some of the engineers may have had experience on multiple propulsion systems while they were cadet sailing, so they definitely want to highlight anything that's going to help, their career field stand out when I look at it on paper.
And just to add to that,
Okay.
when he means by stand out, like say if you went to casualty control, you was on a ship and the diesel stopped working, but what was your impact? What did you do? You may have figured out the problem. You have went through all your troubleshooting skills and figured out how to get the diesel back up, and you was able to walk through it. And you can tell somebody, hey, when I was on board this on a cadet ship and I sailed and we had a diesel problem, this is what I did along with the other engineers, and we assisted and got the diesel back up. And it shows that how you look at things, how do you troubleshoot those things to make the equipment come back up. So we dealt with a lot of those things. If you're navigating on board the ship and you ran into a little difficulty on how the ship was placed or what ships were in the way, and how did you navigate yourself out of that situation, or if the ship was about to run aground and you said, hey, no, why don't we do this, because in the chart it shows that this here, and if you can articulate that in a writing perspective, then someone can see that more than just the ordinary typical situation. You have some outside variance, that you know how to fix a valve, when a water heater busted and on the second deck and it was the captain's water heater, and you jumped in play and you got it all fixed and you fixed the holes and you got it drained down, and you completed whatever processes it was to get that piece of equipment back up to 100% with the assistance of others. But if you can show that you have those troubleshooting skills, then you can write that out clearly and write it where someone can say, okay, I see where the knowledge is going, and that can help them moving forward.
Mike makes a really good statement there, because some of the things that he is discussing there is the great stuff that they should be putting down when they do those evaluation criteria statements. And so a really solid evaluation criteria statement would be when they take the statement line and they go, well, let me think about this for a minute. Oh, well, one time while sailing on board this ship in this position during this situation, we had this problem. All right. This is what I did. This is what the end result is of what I did. This is what the benefit to the ship was from what I did. And so when they tie those things into real life experiences and they convey that, in this case to the reader or the evaluator, it really helps the evaluator to draw a much better picture of the candidate that's in front of them.
Gotcha. Yep. No, definitely. We try and stress examples always paint a good picture, and the action and result you undertook to make something happen is good. So now once they get the application, what's kind of your guys' typical timeline from when they submit an application to when interviews typically happen to then offers going out for various positions?
Ryan, there's two answers to that question, okay? Because
Always.
there's two different scenarios. You know, for right now, for the academy hiring season, the process that's taking place, the individuals at Cal Maritime are given a specific date in which to apply, and then there was a timeline that when we would come back to do the interview. So in that scenario, generally they're given about 30 days to apply. There's somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks after we close the application season before they come back to do interviews. Then they'll select those individuals for interview, and they'll conduct interviews with them. MSC at that point is authorized to offer or do conditional job offers, you know, at that point of interview. So for that session, you know, it could be within 45 days that they could find out whether or not, you know, they have a position with MSC. Now, naturally, that's going to be contingent upon them, you know, completing their school, getting their license, and then, of course, being available, you know, upon graduation to come work for MSC. But, you know, that's the expedited process, just simply for the academy applications. A normal process where they are applying to what we consider to be, you know, the open application season, where anybody, it's not just restricted to Cal Maritime, but anybody can submit an application. Generally what happens in that fashion is that their application comes in, it gets technically reviewed, provided that there's, you know, no issues with the application, it's complete, it can move over to marine employment. They can generally find out within about 6 weeks or so of submitting their application if they're going to be considered for an interview. Okay. Once marine employment does make a decision that they want to interview the individual, based on the availability for the interviewers to conduct interviews, they will schedule an interview with the individual. And then following that interview, that information is, you know, put back with the application, and then a final hiring decision has to be made as to whether or not, you know, they want to do a conditional job offer. Generally, an applicant can expect that process to take about 90 days. Okay. And then following that process, if they are given the conditional job offer and they accept it, then we go into the actual pre-hiring phase, which then, you know, is some background checks, some medical reviews, some drug tests, things like that. How fast that they work on those things, how fast some of that stuff comes back to us, such as the background investigation and so forth, that could be another 30, 60 days before we get the okay that the person can be hired, you know, because we have to do that pre-employment stuff. Once they are found fit for hire, then the new employee orientation group will look at scheduling them for a seat in one of the new employee orientation classes that they have to attend. That's part of the, you know, that's their first step after they get hired, as they go through that new employee orientation. So ideally, if it's a fast track type situation, somebody could submit an application and possibly be in new employee orientation within about 60 to 90 days. Routinely, it could be about 90 to 120 days. So 3 to 4 months from the time they submit the application till the time that they could potentially be in new employee orientation.
Gotcha. Good. Thanks. And then once somebody does submit their application, whether it be for kind of the academy cycle or the open hire, is there anything that they should be doing in that time, or is it strictly just to make sure you have everything, all your ducks in line, you submit it, and then you're sitting back and waiting for you guys to reach back out and contact them?
Generally, what I tell them to do is that because there's a couple phases that application should go through, is that they should periodically, about once a week, they should log into their online profile, go to their application section where they have submitted their application, and then review the status of that application. If there's any technical issues or missing documentation that's in the application, a notice is generally sent to the individual via their profile and also via email. They'll get an email message that says, you have a notice on your profile, please log, or notice on your application, please log into your profile. Well, sometimes those email messages may end up in somebody's spam folder or junk folder, or they just don't look at it, or whatever the case may be. So, and there's a timing associated with responding. So they need to respond to these things as quickly as possible, because, you know, failure to respond to the notice could actually cause their application to be closed. So I tell them, you need to log into your profile at least once a week and check the status of your application to see if it's moved. And what I mean by moved is the status will actually change, and it'll say either received, it could be in a QA process, or it could be under review, or it could be transferred. But basically, once it gets to transferred or under review, that means it's sitting with marine employment. And at that point, they're not going to be asked for any additional information, so they can really stop looking at the application. As soon as marine employment gets done with them, they're going to notify them and say, hey, you know, we want to do an interview with you, or, you know, we didn't select you this time, you know, please reapply again. So check their application status online and monitor it until the application shows that it has been moved to marine employment.
Gotcha. And then, you know, I mean, it's pretty straightforward for our license track students, what they need to be doing to set themselves up for employment with you guys. But thinking more specifically of the yeomans, the storekeepers, the JSOs, what should those students that are in those typically non-seagoing majors and typically don't have internship opportunities that kind of align with that same stuff, what are some things that they should be doing if they are interested in working with MSC in any of those capacities?
Well, first, I would tell them that if they are thinking about working with MSC in one of those capacities and they're not a senior, they need to grab a job announcement and look at it, because that means they have time to look at what we're looking for, and maybe, you know, line something up for themselves that will help them, you know, shore up a position in that area. The key, though, is going to be that they are doing something related to logistics, supply chain management, or you know, general warehousing experiences or clerical experiences and things of that nature there, because that's kind of what the job is going to be to start with for them as an assistant storekeeper or a yeoman storekeeper. And so if they are working to build some of those skill sets up so that they have something that they can convey during an application or on a resume, that's what they should be doing. They should be focusing in that area right there.
And I want to add to that. You got to decide how far do you want to go down. You can say, okay, well, I'm going to go in as an entry level and I will work my way in, and I will show my skill sets when I get there to get me where I need to go. We have had a lot of people that came from the United States Navy that some of the skill sets didn't translate. They had 15 years in the military, 18 years in the military, to even 20, and none of the skills translated over. A lot of them went in entry level and provided applied through the merit promotion process internally and moved up within MSC. So you got to decide to yourself, if you don't have the skill sets, how far would you like to go down in order to move back up? Sometimes you may have to start over in an entry level position and work your way through the process to get where you need to go. There's people that came with MSC that started as an SU and became a supply officer. There's people that came in as a wiper and became a chief engineer. There's people that came in as a hose piper that came from an OS and went all the way to be a captain of a vessel. So it all depends on what you decide, how you're willing to start, and where your endpoint will be.
Nice. Thanks, Michael. Thank you very much on that. And then I guess the last question that I have, so now they got a job offer, they accepted. What, and you guys have touched on it already a little bit, what is MSC doing to help the new hires and develop the skills that they need to succeed on the job?
Well, I think one of the key things is going to be is that, you know, as I said, they're not going to be put in a position where they're most likely, you know, going to fail. They're going to be giving a lot of mentorship from the more experienced mariners that are within inside the organization that will be sailing with them. they're going to be tested. I mean, that's just the nature of the business. And you know, when I say tested, they're going to be put through paces so that they, you know, it's apparent as to what the strengths and what their weaknesses are. Because, you know, you don't necessarily have to focus on somebody's strengths because they've already focused on that. What we need to focus on is what their weaknesses might be so that we can make those areas stronger for them and help them out. So they're going to get training related to the positions that they're going to be in, but there's an expectation that they will have a certain amount of fundamental skill set. So, you know, when a third officer reports to a vessel, there are certain things that the master or the chief mate is going to expect that individual to know, and just by sheer nature that they hold that license. Now, knowing something and having experience in doing it is two different things. And so they're going to be given opportunities to grow those skill sets because they're going to be, you know, monitored. They're going to be, you know, observed. They're going to be trained throughout the processes, you know, as they go on. So, you know, we don't want to see them fail. We're not going to, like a junior supply officer. A junior supply officer is not going to be thrown onto a vessel by himself to start with. Generally, a new hire, especially somebody that's coming with absolutely no naval supply background, which in the case of the academy graduates that we hire for JSO, they're not going to have any of that stuff. All they're going to have is the training that they received prior to going to a vessel. So they're going to be placed on a vessel with a supply officer in most cases, somebody who has the tenure to help them and work them through the process of developing all those skill sets. That's kind of why we tell them that, hey, listen, you know, you get hired as a JSO, in 3 years, you can be eligible for supply officer. Well, why 3 years? Well, because in 3 years, we're going to put you through the various paces and assign you to the various platforms that you need to be assigned to so that you get the necessary experience. And we're confident that you have the skill sets to do the job, because again, we don't want you to fail. It's not about individual failure, it's about team failure. If an individual fails, the team fails. So we don't want that to happen. So I would say that they're going to be giving opportunities to excel, but they're also going to be giving more opportunities to learn. And so how they, you know, take those opportunities and what they do with them opportunities, of course, that's up to the individual. And they can go very far, very quick with MSC if they, you know, stick with it.
Ryan, I want to add to that. 2 words: persistent and consistent. You have to be persistent in what you want, and you have to be consistent. And that means on-the-job training. MSC has a very lengthy knowledge of OJT on every vessel. So you can always, when you're done at the end of the day and you're maybe a little bit tired, you have to be a little persistent and go to the other departments and say, hey, look, I want to learn what you do. I want to be able to follow someone. I want to be able to track myself, and I want to be able to log down my times and put all that OJT time while I'm going there. And I want to be able to pick up whatever skill sets that is required in order for me to move forward. Or if I became a third mate and I don't want to be a third mate no more and I want to be an engineer, maybe I have to go down the engine room and learn what it takes to be a third assistant engineer. Or whatever you want to do with MSC within deck, engine supply, communications, or medical service officer, you can go there, but you have to be willing to do a lot of OJT and be willing to learn the job from face value from others, and be willing, persistent and consistent all the time in order to grab the necessary skills. We have a purser on board ships where we don't hire pursers from the external pool of candidates. What you have to do to become a purser, you have to go on board a vessel and be consistent and persistent to learn all what it takes to be a purser on the vessel in order to be selected to be a purser, because there's only one purser per ship. So, and one MSO per ship, pretty much. So you have to be willing to take what's available to you and continuously be persistent and consistent. And that way it would help you get the necessary skills in order to be advanced.
That persistence that Michael's talking about definitely needs to translate into initiative. You know, individuals, you're going to find individuals on the ship that are going to come in, they're going to do what they do for however many hours you're supposed to do. And then they're going to, you know, when the end of the day runs up, they punch out and that they stop. That's it. The individuals with initiative that ask the questions and say, hey, I want to learn that. What can I do to improve myself? What's my next step? How do I get your job? Those type of questions and those type of attitudes are going to draw people towards that individual that are willing to help them. But if the individual just wants to stand his watch, do his maintenance work, whatever the case may be, clock out at the end of the day and then go climb in his stateroom, nobody's going to hunt him down to find him to take him and say, hey, look, we're tearing this pump apart back here. You want to learn how to do it? It's one of those situations. So the initiative and their own personal drive is really going to be one of the keys to their success.
I got you. No, that makes a lot of sense, and great to hear it from you guys. So with that, and you kind of probably already touched on it, but just any other closing thoughts, words of wisdom, or anything beyond persistent, consistent, and taking initiative?
Well, MSC has a motto says, take command of your career. And that's really what it means. That means it's your career, it's your life. You got to be what you want to be. You take a handle on it and you take advantage of what the opportunity is. And if you take advantage of your career, you can be whatever you want to be with MSC.
Yeah, I can't say it any different than Mike. That's really the key right there. They're in charge, so of their own destiny, their own career. You can get a job any place, but MSC is offering them a career. So, and if they want a career, they can have a very meaningful one with MSC.
Awesome. Well, Michael and Gary, thank you very much again for taking some time out of your day and answering some questions and enlightening our students kind of on the application and job process of MSC. Thank you very much.
Ryan, thank you for having us today. I appreciate the invite very much. And it's always good to talk with you.
Ryan, thank you very much. And hopefully I can make it out to your school next year when everything releases and we can conduct a in-person academy hiring event.
That would be great, Michael.